Can you believe Dwight Yoakam is 68? After all these years, the man still rocks that hat, those tight jeans, and that unmistakable voice. But as long as he's been on stage, there have been rumors about his personal life, career moves, and even his behind-the-scenes choices. And now, he's finally addressing them. So, what's true, and what's just small-town gossip? Did he walk away from something huge? And why is he choosing to speak up now? Stick around, because what Dwight just confirmed might change the way you see him forever. You know, when people think of Dwight Yoakam today, they see the awards, the hits, and the flashy career. But many people don't realize that he had to claw his way up from nothing. And I mean nothing. Way before he was a star, Dwight was just another guy hauling his guitar around to tiny bars in Southern California, trying to get anyone to listen. And let's be honest, Southern California wasn't dying for more country singers back then. It was more surfboards and rock bands than cowboy hats. Meanwhile, country music was getting slicker and poppier in Nashville by the minute. Dwight wasn't feeling that vibe at all. Instead, he doubled down on the old-school, rough-edge sounds he loved. The kind of music that made you feel like you were living every word. Sure, it meant he didn't get booked as easily, but it also meant when people heard him, they remembered him. Playing night after night in bars that were more like battlegrounds than music venues, Dwight learned fast how to command a room. Sometimes, even while dodging beer bottles, there was no fancy PR team, no record label hype machine backing him up. It was just him, his band, and a dream. Word spread the old-fashioned way, one sweaty, unforgettable set at a time. Eventually, Dwight thought, hey, maybe Nashville will get it. So he packed up and headed east, discovering that Music City wasn't interested. They didn't have time for you if you weren't a polished studio singer or a hit songwriter. Most people would have either given up or tried to fit the mold. Dwight did neither. He stayed true to his roots, doing things his way. And, funny enough, that stubbornness ended up sparking something bigger than he ever imagined. A full-on shake-up of what country music could be. Before Dwight Yoakam filled arenas and topped the charts, he did it the hard way. One bar gig at a time. He wasn't chasing fame either. He was chasing that feeling of playing something real, something that mattered. Before anyone outside a smoky bar knew his name, Dwight had already built up a hardcore fan base that didn't care about radio play or awards. They just knew he was the real deal. Those rough nights where he had to win over every crowd gave him something you can't fake in a fancy studio, grit. So when Guitars and Cadillacs finally dropped, it didn't just sound like a new song on the radio. It sounded like a guy kicking down the door, telling his story on his terms. Dwight's first big album wasn't just a debut. It was a statement. After years of getting brushed off, he didn't show up looking for approval. He showed up ready to remind everyone what country music used to sound like, before it got too slick. And he did it big with Guitars, Cadillacs, etc. A record so raw and real, it felt like a shot of adrenaline straight into a genre that had gotten a little too comfortable. With Pete Anderson in the producer's chair, Dwight brought back that tough Bakersfield sound. Loud guitars, sharp lyrics, and that barroom heartbeat that country had almost forgotten about. From the first note, it was clear that Dwight wasn't trying to blend in. He was trying to wake everyone up. His cover of Honky Tonk Man took off fast, but it was Guitars, Cadillacs that hit differently. It wasn't just catchy. It was Dwight's story packed into a song. You could hear the years of scraping by, the stubborn pride, and the swagger he earned the hard way. It wasn't just a win on the charts. It was a win for everyone who still believed music could be raw. The album exploded. Double platinum. Critics loved it. Fans loved it. Even people outside the country scene were paying attention. Suddenly, Dwight wasn't grinding it out in dingy clubs anymore. He was headlining shows nationwide, but he didn't just change his life. He changed country music. He proved there was still room for the rebels, the outsiders, who wouldn't play by Nashville's rules. And just when it seemed like Dwight had found his lane and could write it forever, he flipped the script again. Years later, he teamed up with Beck, the last person anyone expected him to work with. Beck was all about weird, genre-bending, experimental stuff. Dwight was an old-school country. On paper, it shouldn't have worked. But in real life, magic. They linked up while making 3 pairs in 2012, with Beck co-producing a couple of tracks, and instead of trying to mold Dwight into something he wasn't, Beck pushed him to let loose even more, to trust his instincts instead of overthinking everything. There's this one moment that captures it. Dwight laid down this scratch guitar track for A Heart Like Mine. Super rough, not meant to be final. But Beck heard it and said, "Nope, that's the one." And just like that, Dwight leaned back into what had always made him great. Not chasing perfect, but chasing real. That whole experience cracked Dwight wide open creatively. He started mixing that old-school honesty with new, freer sounds, pulling in indie fans and alt-rock kids, a crowd that might never have heard his music otherwise. The best part was, he didn't have to reinvent himself to do it. He just peeled back the layers and got closer to the heart of who he was as an artist. Working with Beck wasn't about chasing a trend. It was about challenging himself, trusting the messy process, and remembering that music is supposed to make you feel something. And honestly, that's what Dwight's always been about. Raw emotion, real stories, no gimmicks. Whether it was honky-tonks or sold-out arenas, scratch guitar tracks or platinum albums, Dwight Yoakam never forgot where he came from. And that's precisely why he'll always have a place in the story of American music. Looking back, working with Beck wasn't Dwight Yoakam taking some weird detour. It was him getting back to why people loved him in the first place, doing things his way without getting boxed in. And honestly, that do-it-your-way spirit didn't stop at music. Long before anyone was blasting guitars and Cadillacs in their truck, Dwight already knew he loved performing. It wasn't just about singing, but grabbing and holding people's attention. He did school plays, local theater, you name it. If there was a stage, he was on it. So, even when his music career took off, that itch to act never disappeared. And people were shocked when he finally landed a significant movie role, playing the not-so-nice Doyle Hargraves in Sling Blade. This wasn't a country star trying to act cute on camera. Dwight brought some real grit, and it paid off big time. Suddenly, Hollywood said, "Wait, this guy's legit." After that, he wasn't just a one-hit wonder in the movie world either. He kept appearing in gritty films like Panic Room and Crank, and even on TV shows like Under the Dome and Wilfred. And he wasn't trying to be flashy every time. He just brought that raw, honest vibe that made his music so good. But acting didn't pull him away from his music. It just gave him another way to tell stories. It has the same heart and grit, just a different kind of stage. Dwight didn't jump from country music to acting. He stretched out a little, proving that real talent doesn't have to fit into just one box. Moving on, the way Dwight threw himself into acting. It was the same way he wrote songs, full on, and from the gut. He didn't just memorize lines or fake emotions. He'd think about what made each character tick, what scared them, broke their heart, and kept them going. To him, acting and songwriting weren't all that different. They both had a rhythm, an emotional beat you had to tap into if you wanted people to feel something. That's why Dwight's performances always felt real, whether he was playing some rough-around-the-edges villain or a wise outsider. You didn't just watch him, you believed him, Dot. But before he won people over in movies, he had a much bigger battle, winning over Nashville. In the 80s, country music was going full-on glossy. Everyone wanted that urban cowboy vibe, polished songs, safe looks, crossover hits, and here comes Dwight, cranking up twangy Bakersfield guitars, singing about heartbreak and dive bars, and wearing outfits that looked straight off a rock stage. Tight jeans, rhinestone jackets, cowboy hat pulled low. You couldn't miss him, and Nashville didn't know what to make of him. Dwight said instead of waiting for their approval, forget it. He hit the L.A. rock clubs, found people who got him, and kept making the music he believed in. Teaming up with Pete Anderson, he doubled down on that raw, honky-tonk sound, with a bit of rock and roll swagger thrown in for good measure. That led to guitars, Cadillacs, etc., etc. A record so good, it forced everyone to sit up and pay attention, even the ones who'd written him off. The best part was Dwight didn't change for Nashville. Nashville had to change for him. Because he remained stubborn, he opened a space for other artists who didn't fit the usual mold. Looking back, he didn't just break into the system, he helped remake it. As great as Dwight and Pete Anderson were together, that kind of magic doesn't always last. They had a good run. Pete's guitar and production helped Dwight find his sound. Without him, we might not have guitars, Cadillacs, etc., etc., or this time. Those albums defined Dwight's career, but eventually things got rocky. Around the early 2000s, it wasn't all smiles and handshakes anymore. Then, in 2004, boom! Pete hit Dwight with a lawsuit, saying Dwight bailed on many concerts and left him financially holding the bag. Pete had already poured his money into prepping for those shows, so it got ugly. They ended up settling out of court. No big public blowout. But let's be real, that kind of thing leaves scars. After the split, Dwight started producing his stuff. He kept that creative freedom he craved, but the sound was never precisely the same without Pete. Still, even after all that drama, most fans look back at their run together like, man, that was the peak, Dwight. It was real. It was gritty. And it's still inspiring artists today. But Dwight's battles weren't over yet. Nope. He had one more fight brewing, this time with the big dogs at Warner Music. So in 2021, Dwight went after Warner over the rights to his old music. See, after 35 years, the Copyright Act lets artists take back their work. Dwight said, "Hey, I want my stuff back." Warner was basically like, "Hey, not so fast." They kept selling and streaming his early albums without permission. And Dwight wasn't having it. It wasn't just about money either. This was about owning the music he built his whole career on. Warner threw up every legal roadblock they could, arguing about paperwork, timing, and whatever else. Classic move. But in the end, they settled in 2022. Nobody knows precisely what the deal was, but it's safe to say Dwight got at least part of what he wanted. And honestly, good for him. Taking on a major label isn't easy, But Dwight's always been the kind of guy who'd rather fight for what's his than roll over. And the whole thing, it wasn't just about Dwight. It lit a fire under many veteran artists who realized they could stand up too. He made a move that wasn't just smart for himself, but for every musician who's ever been stuck in a bad deal. Because if there's one thing you can always count on with Dwight, it's this. He's gonna do things his way, no matter how big the opponent is. Dwight Yoakam didn't just act south of heaven, west of hell. He did everything. He wrote, directed, co-produced, and even handled the soundtrack. It was his project, start to finish. He wanted to mix an old-school, gritty Western vibe with some deep psychological storytelling, and he brought in some big names, too. Vince Vaughn, Bridget Fonda, Billy Bob Thornton. But even with all that going for it, the movie didn't land. Critics weren't kind. They called it messy, self-indulgent, and too ambitious. The story was hard to follow. The pacing was all over the place, and it didn't connect with audiences. It flopped at the box office and didn't do much better on home video. A lot of people chalked it up to Yoakam being new to directing. He had the vision, but maybe not the experience to pull it off. What was supposed to be this big breakout moment turned into a harsh lesson about how trying to do too much can sometimes backfire. And it wasn't just his reputation that took a hit. Financially, it was brutal. When investors bailed out mid-production, Yoakam poured in his money and even went into debt to finish the movie. The pressure of it all led to much friction with people he'd worked with for years. Some of those relationships ended badly, with lawsuits and big shakeups in his team. Although South of Heaven and West of Hell didn't go over well, it's still a big part of Dwight Yoakam's story. It shows how fearless he is creatively. He took a considerable risk, and it didn't land. But it wasn't a full-on disaster either. Most fans and people in the industry look back on it now and say, all right, that didn't quite work, but they don't write it off completely. Yoakam hasn't talked much about what happened after that movie. He's kept pretty quiet about it. But the fact that it still gets mentioned says something. It shows he's not the kind of guy who plays it safe to avoid failure. And if the whole thing knocked him down a peg, which we're not even sure it did, it only made him more determined to stay true to his vision, no matter how tough or costly that might be. Moving on, his acting career has had some real gems. After he broke out in Sling Blade, where he played the super intense and angry character Doyle Hargraves, he started landing all kinds of roles that let him show off how versatile he actually is. Like in Panic Room, he played this masked intruder named Raoul, and the guy was seriously creepy. He barely said anything, but he had this icy energy that made him one of the scariest parts of the movie. People were surprised, because that's nothing like his usual vibe as a musician. And it made them realize, wait, this guy can act. But Yoakam's not all dark and dramatic. He's got a fun, quirky side, too. He had a hilarious cameo in Wedding Crashers, and he popped up in that weird but awesome show Wilfred, playing this eccentric doctor. Those roles allowed him to be funny and kind of out there, which showed he wasn't stuck in just one type of role. He's done TV too, like an Under the Dome, and held his own. He blended into the ensemble and brought something solid to the table. And through all of it, he's always seemed thoughtful about what acting means to him. He said in interviews that he approaches acting like he approaches music, with honesty, heart, and a love for telling real stories. What's sweet is that he credits doing theater back in junior high and high school, with helping him build the confidence to play these roles. That early experience gave him the guts to trust his instincts in front of the camera. And for him, acting was never about chasing fame. It's more about digging into those deep human emotions, just like he does when he writes songs not looking back. He doesn't separate the two at all. His music and acting are just different ways of telling stories. He always tries to share something honest and genuine on stage or screen. Dwight Yoakam has always done things a little differently. Whether acting in films or strumming a guitar on stage, he blends Hollywood and country in a way that works. Gritty, honest, and entirely his own. Clunny enough, stepping into other people's shoes on screen has made him better at what he's always done best, telling stories through music. Acting taught him to lean into emotion, and that's bled right back into his songs. More feeling, more truth, more depth. He's even said that the vulnerability it takes to act isn't all that different from standing on stage alone with a guitar. Both require you to show up, to be real, and to let people in. That connection between acting and music has only strengthened his performances. And now, instead of just looking back at the road he's traveled, Yoakam's focused on what's next. At 68, he's not slowing down. He's still writing, touring, and pushing boundaries, all while staying grounded in the kind of country music that shaped him. While the genre's been drifting into pop and hip-hop, Yoakam stands tall as a reminder of its roots. But he's not stuck in the past. He's just making sure we don't forget where it all started. He's also become a go-to guy for up-and-coming artists looking for guidance. His Sirius XM show, Dwight Yoakam and the Bakersfield Beat, does more than play the hits. It gives space to the voices that often get overlooked. And here's the cool part. He's not done exploring. He's hinted at getting more into acting again, maybe even trying his hand at directing or producing. Given his eye for storytelling and character, it honestly feels like a natural next step. Whatever he does, you get the sense that Dwight Yoakam isn't interested in fading quietly into legend. He's still creating, still evolving, and still full of surprises. If there's one thing about Dwight Yoakam, he knows how to stick around and do it his way. Whether he's dropping a new song, tearing it up on stage, or stepping onto a movie set, he brings that same realness and emotional punch that made people fall in love with him in the first place. The cool part was his story isn't anywhere near finished. His legacy isn't just about the music or the movies. It's about the way he shaped the culture around them. Dwight has always had this fearless way of mixing old-school country with his own style. Never chasing trends, just doing what felt right. And that's precisely why he stands out. Even now, with the music industry constantly changing, he's not just coasting. Dwight's still finding new roads to drive down. His connection with fans keeps getting stronger, too. The ones who've been with him forever are still here, and a whole new generation is discovering him, streaming the classics, hearing him pop up in collabs and realizing that some sounds don't go out of style.